Well, hello, friends. Trisha Goyer here again, and I'm here with a new friend, Amy Betters-Midtvedt. And I'm so excited because I feel like we've known each other forever, even though I just started reading her book. But the things that she says, I'm like, I get you. Yes, amen. Like I was putting on makeup, and yes, this I agree totally. I'm so glad you said that. And so I'm actually talking to you
Oh, that
an
makes me
hour
feel so
ago
good. I
when I
love
was
it.
actually putting on my makeup. So
That's so
first of
good.
all, welcome, Amy. And why don't you start by
Thank
telling us
you.
a little bit about yourself?
You bet. Thank you, first of all, so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here. Your compliments mean so much as a parent of 10 children, right? I am a parent of 5 children with 10 years apart. My youngest right now is 13. My oldest is 23. We have the blessing this year of they've all found their way home for a year. So all 5 are living back under our roof for a year. So that's again, a blessing is how we're going in to look at that. So they're going all over the place. I am a writer, an author, and also a literacy coach right now in the schools. So I work with actually the middle school and high school students all day long. And then I come home to middle school, high school, and college kids all night long. So that's sort of, it's just really my world that I'm inundated with right now in education and in my regular life.
Which makes sense why you understand. I mean,
Correct.
I love when you as soon as they turn 11 and 12, they're going to start rolling their eyes at you
It is
and
so
all
true.
the things. And, at first I thought, oh my gosh, what am I doing wrong with
Right.
these children and their attitudes? Like something is wrong. And
Correct.
then when, again, you said the same thing, when the younger ones get there, you're like, oh, here we go.
Here we
And
go.
I'm like, I'll tell my husband, I'm like, well, they'll only be this age for this way for about 4 years. I mean, then we get teen. It's a whole different thing. But there's these little windows.
There
And I
are.
tell other moms 10 to 14 is oh my
It
gosh,
is.
mom, rolling eyes. You
Yes.
don't know anything. Teenagers,
Absolutely.
then they get sneaky.
Correct.
Then they move out, and then they're like every day, mom, mom, mom. So
It's like this. You just described that life cycle just ideally. I can just picture it, right? Absolutely.
yeah. So I love that someone else knows it and you're writing about it. So let's talk about the title of the book. We haven't even mentioned that yet.
Yes.
You'll make it and they will too. Everything no one talks about when you're parenting teens.
Correct.
And I wish I would have had this book. Well, of course, I had kids before you did, but when
Right.
I had those first kids, I freaked out. I thought I was
Exactly.
doing everything wrong. I
Exactly.
overparented them.
1,000%.
And then we adopted 7 kids. And when
Oh,
we adopted them, they were 11, 13, 13, and 15. And
wow.
then our world exploded because they'd been through trauma. And so
Yes.
then I would go back to my older kids. I'm like, you didn't do anything wrong. I don't even know why I was so hard on you. Like, mom.
Right.
So, because I realized
Yes.
it could have been worse. So let's talk about
Correct.
your experiences and why you wanted to write this book. Because
Yes.
obviously there's a need for people like me and like you who all of a sudden you're like, who is this
Who
child
is
and
this
what is
child?
happening?
Absolutely. That was, you were describing my exact experience and exactly why I wrote the book. Because I was looking around and I was like, I have to be the only one this is happening to. My kids are off the rails. Where did they go? Where are those agreeable kids that said they were going to love me forever? Right.
Mhm.
And that first one just throws you for a loop. And truly, the more I got into it, the more I also felt a little bit like, as a community, we were going silent with each other, right? Because our kids' stories, we couldn't tell in the same way where we could call and tell the thing that our 2-year-old did or our 7-year-old did, right? There was just more of this idea of the secrecy maybe around this, or sometimes even some shame. But while at the same time,
Mhm.
everyone's sharing this stuff online, oh, here's what my kid did and my kid did, and everybody else's life just looks like this dream. And I am over here with this kid that will not talk to me, is only arguing. And then, like you said, as they get older, and then these really big things were happening. And really, there
Mhm.
was a very specific night where I sat outside of the bedroom of one of my kids. And I had my blanket and my pillow, and I was sleeping outside that room because I was so incredibly worried and I could not get to this kid. And all I wanted was I just wanted this. I wanted a book. I wanted something that I could pick up that was pages, and it would tell me someone else's story and that they were okay. I just needed to know it, right? I just needed to know that for somebody else, it was okay. I could cling to that. And so that's really that idea that then was born into this book, where I had so many of those moments where I felt alone, and I have incredible people around me. But there are moments as a parent where you're just in it with your kid, right? And so those are the stories I try to tell in the book about where are those places, like here's what happened for us. Here's what I did, and please do not do this because it was incorrect. And then here's what I was able to do. And then also here's that hope, because I was also realizing I wasn't finding my joy anymore. I was so into
Mhm.
this sorrow and this grief about what I was losing, that I was losing my joy. And actually there was a lot of joy still there to be found, even in these really, really hard moments. I mean, and sometimes
Ah,
we're scraping for the
yeah.
joy.
Yeah, and when our kids start doing things, like you said, we often like, "Oh my goodness, we're the only ones that are dealing
Yes.
with this." Also, it's easy to share all the good things on, like, social media,
Right.
but, like, I know that if I talk about them like, my kids are on social media, they see what I'm saying. I can't, like, say all the things that
Right.
they're doing, but
Right.
then also it's out there forever, so if there's, like,
Correct.
a future employer that's gonna see what they're doing at this
Amen.
age. And so, yeah, I was at a writers conference this year, and I
Mhm.
met this new friend, and she walked up to me, she goes, "Okay, I've adopted 2 kids from foster care also, and I know you have too, and I know you have stories that you can't tell anyone and I can't tell anyone, but can we have lunch?" And I said,
Absolutely.
"Yes." So we sat down together and we're literally for like an hour and a half, like, like we just were talking and sharing
Yes.
and how did you deal with this? How did you deal with this?
I love
Of stuff
that.
we can't share, but I love that she's like, I know you were also in this place, but it could have
Yes.
been anyone. Like, I know you have teenagers. Let's talk.
Right.
I know you have preteens. Let's talk. It doesn't have to be that
Absolutely.
specific, but often we don't go to each other. And I'm
We
so
don't.
glad that she came
Oh,
and
that's a
said that.
gift.
And
Yes.
now all the time, then we saw each other again. I'm like, okay, we need to catch up.
Yes,
So
I love
it's,
that so
yeah,
much. Oh, that's it. That's it right there. Like, where can we find those spaces and those entry points where we can support each other in those moments and just say,
yeah,
yeah, I've been there. Yeah, I've been there.
absolutely.
Absolutely.
So it's pretty brave that you're like, okay, let's talk about all these things. Let's
Yes.
put it out there. So how did you approach this?
Yes.
First of all, being vulnerable,
Hmm.
sharing, but also I know you have kids that are like,
Correct.
Mom, why would you share this?
That's so true. So that was a balancing act. There are stories that didn't make the book, right?
Mhm.
Because they actually signed off like a legal document on every single thing I put in the book. So and they read everything. So that was it. And fortunately, like you, I have some kids who are out of it now. My
Yeah,
23 and my
exactly.
21-year-old, they're open books, and they're open books about their own stories in their lives. So that was a no-brainer. On my more private kids, there are some stories that are kind of squished together, and a couple of things that are kind of changed just a little bit. So there's not identifying features. Um, and there were kids that asked that. And actually, there are some stories my kids said, "Please put this in the book." And I was thinking of, actually maybe next book, or maybe
We're not gonna put that in.
right. Let's just sit on that one. But it really was such a wonderful, also healing time for writing this book, because I would come up with things and I could actually just show them, like I talk about parenting your first pancake, your first child. And that's when I find myself really apologizing to a lot. And so when I
Mhm.
wrote that up, I was able to share with her, and she's like, "Mom, I, I just wish you could see that it's okay." And so it was a healing conversation. And through that, I actually could kind of put a little bit of closure on some of those things. I wrote about it. I put it out there. It was healing for me. I think it was healing for her. And it also hopefully will help other people to say it's never too late to go back and say, I really wish I would have handled that differently. Grounding you for the entire summer now seems like an extreme move, right? Like, and I'm not going to do that again. And thank you for teaching me that lesson and being in that space with me. And I'm going to do better. So that was just a wonderful kind of byproduct of writing this book. And they were so excited about it. And that was really cool. They feel like they're in it, and they were able to share some
Mhm.
of their harder things in particular. Um, and so that was just made it a really exciting journey for our family.
I love that you're
Yeah.
able to share, and then probably they got insight on what you shared, but
Yes.
also they're able to reflect on it and then coming together and realize like, okay, we were both in a learning process. I mean, you've never had a kid that age before.
Right.
They've never been that age
Right.
before.
Like,
Yeah.
what were we supposed to do? Of course we're gonna mess up. Of course we're gonna do crazy things. And then that's the whole thing. It's just that coming back around and finding that we were so much farther down the road. We were in this cycle now where we're so connected. It's we can laugh about some of these things, right?
Mhm.
Which is just feels like a miracle when I think back to some of the spots where we were, where I thought, we will not survive this, or I will not survive this. Like,
Exactly.
right? Like, go with God. I don't even know what's going to happen next. So it's wonderful to be able to come full circle with some of those things.
I love that. So let's talk about this over-parenting
Oh yeah.
thing that
Oh
you
yeah.
because I mean, I was there too.
Right.
You just have to feel like you have to control everything,
Yes.
and so with our older kids, they somehow survived it. And then we got the kids from trauma who were not wanting to survive my overparenting. They were just
Right.
going to fight me. My older kids
Yes.
kind of just went with the flow, but they
Yes.
were just fighting at every angle. And then the more they fought, the more I would like
Yes.
surround them. And I love how you said it's just helpful to know that someone else lived through this and was
Correct.
okay with it. Because there was a time when our twins were 17, getting ready to turn 18, like
Yes.
6 months away. And like they were just trying to make every bad decision that they can make
Yes.
within our home, they were just trying to do that. Like,
Yes.
let's figure out today. I'm sure they had like this meeting
Oh, 100%.
together,
Yes.
like
Yes.
today,
Yes.
what bad decision can we
What
make?
else is on our list that we can just check?
Exactly. And
Correct.
so I remember talking to a counselor, like finally I had to go to counseling, and
Yes.
he's like, you know, you've done everything you could. Like they're gonna at 18, they're gonna be able to decide these things. So I would just like prepare them for adulthood, kind of
Yes.
ease back. And I'm like, what are you talking
Like, that
about?
is the opposite of what I want to do right now.
I know. And I'm like, they might like, I'm like, they'll probably leave. He goes, well, if they do, then they leave. He goes, but I have seen when adults back off, even if
Yes.
their kids leave for a while, the relationship is better. And that
Yes.
little glimpse of him saying, I have seen other people in relationships with
Yes.
their kids like you,
Yes.
and it turned out okay, was like, oh, it turned out okay. And so
Right.
now with my last 4 that are here,
Yes.
I'm like, "Oh, well, I hope you make a good decision." And people are looking at me, and I'm like,
Right?
the more I try to control, the more they will fight. So let's talk about this. Let me hear your experiences
You
with
were
this.
That is absolutely it, and I really felt that a lot with my oldest. Like, she was the pusher backer, and she was like that when she was 2. They're basically who they are, right? Like, I
Yep.
don't know why I was surprised. Like, she wouldn't go to bed when she was little unless you said, "Do you wanna walk upstairs or do you wanna be carried?" And then she had to pick.
Mm,
So that's how she also was as a teenager, right? But I wasn't giving her choice at that point because she started down some of these making bad decisions, just things I never thought she would do. And so instead of giving her choice or working on our connection, I overparented times 1,000. Like, I'll just ground you yet longer. I'll ground you longer. And I talk in the book about how when I grounded her, she was actually caught in a huge lie, and said she was sleeping in a backyard of a house, and she was an hour and a half away sleeping on actual literal cliffs.
I know when I read that, I'm like, "Oh," like my jaw dropped.
Literal
I'm like,
cliffs. And
yeah.
then her friend posted about it the next day on social media. So that's how she was caught. Hello, thank you, social media, finally for something. Um, and I grounded her for those 3 months. She literally looked me in the eye, took her paints and canvases out, and said I was looking for an opportunity to catch up on my art. Like, she wasn't even going to give me, right? It was like, I don't care what you do. Like, you will not control me. Right. And she was right. I mean, it's exactly what your counselor said. Like, I could continue to lean into that and have her walk out the door and never come back, because who's going to want to come back to a place where someone
Mhm.
is trying to control your every move? I mean, all my feedback to her was, you're messing up. Now you messed up again. Okay, here's another way you messed up. So she's hearing the narrative of, you are a mess up. You make
Mhm.
no good decisions. You cannot be trusted with anything. Who wants to come back to that? Nobody. And so I was losing her right in front of my eyes. And when she was in the weeds, she wasn't going to come to me for advice. Why would she? And I wanted her to be able to come to me with some of these hard things. I remember really just letting her have it. And just, I'm really good at long lectures that are very loud, and they can sometimes sound like yelling. Right, and I was just unleashing this on her, and I could see in the back of her eyes actually that fear. Like, she was scared
Mm.
of me. She did not she was I was, like, physically forcing her away, and that's really when I started to make the decision to do things a different way, and to realize exactly what you said. She needed to be prepared to deal with the consequences of her bad actions, and I was trying to protect her from every bad thing ever happening to her.
Mhm.
So she was learning nothing at the same time, right? So it just needed to be, you're going to have to start owning this kid, and to pull back and let her live her life and deal with the consequences of her actions was one of the hardest things I've ever done, because it just is so hard to watch our kids fail. It's so hard to watch them walk headlong into something that's going to hurt them. But they kind of need to do it. And then they need that spot where I know when that happens, I can come home. And another kid who had made a really poor choice, it did have to come. He came home and he's a couple of kids down. So I'm a little better at this by this point, right? And he was able to say, I could have either felt like I needed to drive off a cliff or come home to you. And I am so happy I felt like I could come home to you. And I knew what was happening was bad, but I knew you would help me deal with that thing. And so that was ultimately where I started to feel like, okay, this is sticking. I'm seeing the results. I'm seeing us approaching this a different way. And I'm showing up in a totally different way for my kids than I was before.
Yeah, let's talk about what that showing up in a different way looks like, because I think it is that fear
Oh,
driving us
yes.
that is because we can see the consequences. Like, I can see
Right.
where you're headed. And then some of them have made the decisions. One of our daughters went away to college.
Mm-hmm.
And the next semester she came home and she was getting a little chunky.
Mm-hmm.
And we're like, do you think
Right.
she's pregnant? Do you think she's hiding her pregnancy from us? Oh, yes, she was. She was hiding her pregnancy. So some
Oh,
of those decisions do happen. Like, it does happen. Like, we could see where it's going.
we know.
But also,
Yes.
she's away at college. And
Yes.
then she was hiding her pregnancy. And now we have this beautiful grandson that we love so much. But it's so hard when you tell them, but then they
Yes.
are like, they have to live out their lives. And
Yes, you absolutely can't save them, even from the big things. Like that is
yeah.
a big thing, right? And we can
Mhm.
see it. And boy, do I relate to that, because those are the things where you literally, it's so much of our time and energy that we are wasting trying to save them from those things, right? It is equipping them to be able to hold up on the other side of that. Like, all right, now
Mhm.
here's where we are. Now we're parenting. All right. So
Yep.
how can I help you? How
Yeah.
can I support you? How can I be here for you? And knowing that, and truly, I also have a therapist. I keep saying, like, get a teenager, get a therapist. I'm
Yes,
not kidding. You need
exactly.
someone to just listen to you, right? And mine is so wonderful. And I said that too. Like, there's all these worst case scenarios that you think you can somehow get in front of, and you can't, because they are human people living human lives, and human things
Mhm.
are going to happen to them all the time. And so you have to make your peace with that. And then when you show up, it is not in like, here's what you need to do, because no matter what you said to her, and you said all the right things and did all the right things, that was still a choice that she made, that humans make.
Yep.
And then there's the consequence. Okay, so now we're all in it together. If we are constantly in it together, and we recently had a kiddo that lost his job. So he's in a gap year, thought he had this job that he just absolutely loved, didn't work out. And I needed that minute. Like when I found out, right? Like I was happy I had a minute to deal with it as a human and be like, because we're allowed to have our human reactions, as I'm sure
Mhm.
you have too. Like,
Mhm.
oh my gosh, I went down really quickly. Now, instead of going through the loop over a course of 3 months of what is the worst that can happen? What can I do? How can I fix this? I went through the loop really fast and then was able to respond to him over text, like, how are you feeling about it? What do you need from us next? Right? Instead
Mm.
of, oh my gosh, what are you going to do? This is terrible. How are you going to pay for your car? How are you going to now? It was none of those things. It's just, how are you doing? How
Mhm.
can I support you next? And boy, was that conversation we entered into completely different, because he could have his human emotions. We could help him walk through that. And then on the other side, there was nothing I could have done to help him keep that job. Nothing.
Right. Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
Like, no, we did all the right things and we said all the right things. But in that moment, like, it was based on what his decisions he was making. He had to learn, and he
Yeah.
course corrected completely. He's like, I don't think I was ready for that job, clearly. What can I do to get ready for a job like that in the future?
Mhm.
And he decided now to go back to school. And whereas school was not what he wanted to do at all. Like, that's beautiful. That was a beautiful lesson. But boy, it was hard. It was just really
Mhm.
hard. But we have to deal with it still as grown people. We're dealing
Yeah.
with hard things all the time.
Yeah. And I think the more we let them, like, well, we don't let them, they will fail.
It
Like,
will. It's going to
they
happen.
will fail. So it's
Everybody
not
hear
like
us.
we're, yeah,
Everybody hear us. It
whether
will
we let
happen.
them or not try to let them,
It
they
doesn't
are going
matter.
to fail at some time.
Irrelevant.
And
Yep.
I got pregnant at 17.
Okay.
And then my grandma and my mom's Bible study group invited me to Bible study.
Oh
They
my
gave me a baby
gosh.
shower and I gave my life to God because I realized, like, oh, these other people that I was like having fun with and hanging out
Right.
with are
Right.
not around. this church group was here. Maybe God loves me. And that's when my life changed. And I
That
think so
is
many times
beautiful.
we have to get through the hard stuff
Yes.
and then come around and see what we really need to get on the right path. I mean, there's a reason it's called the testimony. Like, we all need those things. And we don't want to give our kids the opportunity to do that. But
Right.
somewhere along the line, it's going to happen.
And God will, what a perfect example. God will
Mhm.
use it for good. Like
Mhm.
all this stuff that happens, He will use it for good. Like we just need to kind of lean into that. And that is also, like, I think just parenting teenagers in general has deepened my faith times 1,000 because I have got to be on my knees. There is nowhere else to be sometimes,
Mhm.
right? I am just, God, use this for good. God, can you please use it? Can you speak to their hearts? Can you help them listen? Can you be that voice? Can you be on the other side of that door when I cannot be there and they are not letting me in, right? And I feel like what a perfect example you've given of God just, I mean, for His glory.
Yep.
Amen, 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 right? And so, right, we can't get in front of it anyway. So let's not rob them from it, and let's help them also see how God can use the things that are happening to them for good.
Yeah, I love it. And I think the more we try to control things, we are, like you were saying, we're just going to push them away, and
Amen.
we will hurt that relationship, and
Yes.
then they can't come back,
Right.
or don't want to come back.
Don't want
And
it.
so
It's
we
so
want
much.
it to be open. So, like, let's talk about the balance of giving them advice, but also now you have to choose yourself. And well, that wasn't a good choice. So, how do you even work that out? And I know the book goes into a lot. We talk about lots of things, dating and fashion and church and all the struggles. But how do we go between, here's some advice, you have to make the choice, and okay, that choice might not have worked out.
Correct. I really think it is that idea of sort of what I said to my son, right? Like, how are you feeling about that? How can I
Hmm.
support you? And it depends on the age of the kid, right? So like I've
Right.
got 14 right now, or 13 to 23. So those conversations look different across the span. And with the but it's really essentially the same thing. It's just the
Hmm.
level. And if you can start earlier, they are better equipped. And I'm sure you see that too. Like I look at
Hmm.
my youngest is so much more equipped to deal with the outcome of his decisions
Right.
because we've done that on a loop now. Like, if little choices, you make that choice. Okay, so now here's what happened. You have not been opening your backpack all week. I am seeing that you have a ton of missing homework. Gosh, you must be really worried about that because now this weekend, you are actually not going to get to go hang out with your friends because you're going to have to get that done first because homework comes first. So, gosh,
Hmm.
bummer. Make sure that you let your friends know you can't come. And there's no emotion there, right?
Right.
It's like
Exactly.
there's no emotion. It's just like I really feel bad that you're in that struggle, but I think I believe in you. I believe you can get it done. And that threads through every single thing that the decisions that they're making. It is I will provide. I had a really big conversation with one of my daughters who was making a big decision um, the other night, and it really was like, do you want advice around this? Do you want to hear, or do you just want to make this choice? And she was like, well, I don't know. Like, what are you thinking? I said, well, I'm going to go into this fully knowing you're going to probably not listen to anything I say because I get it. I know how old you are and I know how I felt, but I'm going to just give you what, like, if in an ideal world, this is kind of what I see. And I tried to say it in a non-judgmental way, just like from my vantage point here, having been through a lot, this is how I see it. I understand if you don't see it that way, you can take or leave anything I'm saying, and I'm not going to feel bad. Right. So, like, there's no judgment even attached to my advice here or the need for you to take it. I'm just going to tell you, and you can choose or not. And the outcome of that decision, it was so interesting that at the beginning, it was like, I could tell it was very much like, I'll listen. It's fine. But it goes in. And a couple days later, it was, you know what? I've actually rethought that. And I'm feeling sort of what I did, Mom, is I thought if I followed this advice or I thought about that, what would I feel inside? And she's like, I actually felt kind of relieved. And I'm
Mm.
making a different decision. And so it's still worth it, right? Like putting our wisdom or our thoughts or our perspective when we can. And because the door was open for her in that moment, for me to be able to say things, but also like knowing if she didn't follow that advice, I'm not going to follow up with it being judgy or saying, well, what if you would have listened to me? Because gosh, sometimes you want to do that, right? Like, told you, right? There's so many times you just want to be like, told you, I told you. Okay, I'm not going to told you. I am just going to listen and offer non-judgmental advice that is, my love is not tied to this. When I say make your own decision, I mean that for real 100%, even if it's the opposite. And part of that is I want them to listen to the voice God has planted in their heart
Mm-hmm.
above mine, because sometimes mine still does speak fear. So I'm just a human.
Right.
I am
Yeah.
not God. I cannot go in there and remove all fear. Sometimes I am like, oh my gosh, if you do this, I feel like I really feel worried about you. So I want them to listen to the voice God has put in them, because sometimes that voice actually will lead them to take risks for him that would be too scary for me to tell them to do. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So that's, I think, a huge part of it as
Yeah.
well.
Oh, I love that. And so what I love is that you know what you want to say, but you ask like, can I share something? And so
Yes.
I'll often say, can I ask you a question? Or
Yes.
would you like me to like say maybe a different side to that? And
Right.
so if they
Yes.
say no, then they say no.
Yes.
But often they're like, what? Like what?
That's
Like,
exactly it.
and so I'll say, well, like we had a situation with one of our daughters has her own apartment and someone wanted to be a roommate. And I said, that's a decision. She's like telling me all about her parents. And like, can I offer something? She's like,
Yeah,
what? And she's like, have you taught of the parents' point of view? Like,
sure.
do you think everything she's saying is the truth?
Right.
Or is she mad at her parents? I don't
Right.
know. It sounded like so all this. And so later, it was late. So she still did the roommate situation.
Yep.
That did not work out well. But later she's like, Mom, I should have like at least talked to their parents or maybe asked what they were thinking. So she actually approached this girl's parents and had a
Oh, wow.
conversation with them,
That's
saw the
amazing.
side of you, and together they're trying to help this girl. So anyway, but
Right.
she reached out and went to the parents because, and so we joke, and I don't say I told you so, but I kind of say I told you so because I told her before, I'm
Yes.
like, you need to get tattooed on your knuckles.
Yes.
Girl, listen to your mother, like
I love it.
GLYTM. G
Absolutely.
and so
Yes.
I'll say, so you just need to put on your tattoo like
Yeah.
GLYTM. Girl,
Yes.
listen to your mother. So
Absolutely.
anytime she says stuff, I'm like,
Mm,
like tattoo.
gosh. Tattooing.
And she's like, I
I
know.
a
I should
tattoo.
have
Yeah.
listened.
Yeah. That's
So
so
it's
good.
kind of not I told you so, but it is kind of I told you so
It
because
is.
it makes them remember. But the question is the important thing because
Yes.
if you're just giving them advice and they don't want to listen, they won't listen,
They won't.
and then it's nagging and they'll just shut it off. But if you say,
Absolutely.
can I ask you something, or what do you think about this, or
Yes.
have you thought of it this way?
Yes. Uh,
Then they are open, at least open, even if they're still like eye rolling or
Right,
whatever.
right. You, because you know when they're listening, when they're not. And that's was so hard for me, because when I really feel like I have to tell you something, like it's hard for me to wait until you're ready. But boy, otherwise I'm just wasting every single bit of my breath and
Mhm.
damaging the relationship, because now I'm
Right.
coming at you like, just like you said, nagging. It is waiting for that open door, that opportunity. But we can. I love the language that you're using, because I do think that there is language we can use that does open the door. Like, can I
Mhm.
offer you something here? Do you want, or sometimes like, do you want me to push back on that for you a little bit to be sure that
Mhm.
that's really what you want to do? Or, those kinds of things can really open that door just a crack. And
Yeah.
sometimes they have to sit on it for some time. It's not going to be an instantaneous new decision. It's down the road where that happens.
Yeah, and just asking questions. So one of our daughters has to finish her teaching credentials, online teaching credentials before she leaves next week. So it's just like, so how's that going? Oh, it's good. This is what lesson I'm on. Okay. How many do you have to do? This many. Oh, how many days until you have to go? This many. Oh, so how many do you think you need to do a day?
Yeah.
This many.
Yeah.
Oh, so like your boyfriend's coming from out of town. You think you might not want to do it that day? So, like I was just asking a question. Pretty soon you see her eyes as it's becoming a reality. I
Yes.
could have walked in there and said, "You're like probably have 5 days you can work on this."
Great.
Think
Right.
about like I could have like blah 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 blah
Right.
blah. It
Yes.
was like questions, and it
Yes.
still was the same result, but she
Yes.
was like computing as I was
Right,
asking her.
right, and then all of a sudden you see, and then sometimes it opens all the way up to like, "Oh my gosh, wait, I'm in the weeds. I think I need some help." Right? And it's like it goes from, right, that nothing to like all of a sudden they're asking for your support, because of the
Exactly.
way that you approached it. Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. I love that so much. So
Yeah.
good.
So like we could literally talk all day
We
because
could.
it's like,
I think we could. I
but
know.
I love that you already like shared so much in this book. Like
Yes.
when I was listening, I was talking back to you like, oh yeah, I agree with that. I really like that point. So there's a couple things I want to talk or touch, which is actually one thing that's important, I think, before we go.
Sure.
Let's talk about mental health
Yes.
because there is the point of they're not listening. We're trying to help them, we're trying to
Yes.
give them space. But let's talk about mental health, because there is a time where we need to maybe overstep our bounds,
Yes.
get them with a counselor,
Absolutely.
check into things more,
Yes.
because things could go down a bad path. And I just wanted to make sure someone didn't end this podcast just saying, "Oh, I could just totally hands
No.
off everything," because mental health is something we do need to press into. So I would love to hear your
Yes, it
thoughts on
it
that.
absolutely is. It absolutely is, and that was when I also didn't see coming when that happened in our house. It was a very big
Mhm.
shock, to me, and in particular, when it first manifested, and several of my kids have these struggles, but it was with my most outgoing, like, theater kid, right? He was suddenly
Mhm.
in the grips of this anxiety, which is manifesting as anxiety attacks and all these things, and so, and sometimes in those moments, their fear makes them want everybody to go away. Right?
Mhm.
Like
Mhm.
I don't want anyone by me. I just want to be by myself. Now they're living in their fear. And so those are the moments where a closed door can't just stay a closed door, right?
Mhm.
I equate it to like when my kids had strep throat, I wasn't going to just leave them in their rooms to like hopefully heal.
Mhm.
Right? Like
Mhm.
that's not the way the human body works. And so there's a biology to this mental health as well. Your brain is an organ and all
Right.
these things are happening and you need to address those things. It's it's also too much. Like, I'm not going to try to deal with a medical problem, a broken leg, and like, I'm going to look at a YouTube video and splint you up, right? I'm also not going to do that
Yeah.
when you are in the midst of, because initially I'm like searching, what do I do? What do I do? So, in those moments, that is where we do have to push ourselves in. We have to know what is a sign for our own kids to know them, to know this is not adding up. This is not normal behavior for them. This is on the other side of normal. And so for us, reaching out to our pediatrician, who is just the most wonderful person on the planet, was our first step because that gives them another person to connect with,
Mhm.
another person to be able to normalize that struggle for them. Like, this is normal. This happens to people. And there are ways out of that. And then sometimes, for some kids, it took no time at all. There was relief and excitement around like getting the help that they needed. And for others, it was like, I want no part of that. I want no part of that. And so it was a longer road to say, well, this is actually what you need to do for your healing. That you are going to continue to go to this counselor. You are going to continue to see your doctor on a regular basis. This is a medication that we're going to try to see if we can um, help you move out of this. And then knowing, unlike strep throat or a broken leg, first of all, it's not a straight path to healing. X, Y, and Z, and you're fine, right? It's
Mhm.
not that. And no one is bringing you a meal when your kid is sick, right? It is like, it feels like it's very underneath
Mhm.
this cloak of secrecy. And so making sure that you are connected to people that are going to be able to support you and sharing as much of that with your people that are safe so that you have a community around your kiddo, just like you would. And I think that's why my older girls are so passionate about this book and about sharing their stories, because they were like, Mom, people need to know that
Mhm.
this happens. They saw it firsthand. Even just sharing, I talk about eating disorders that we've dealt with in our house in the book, and them then realizing what friends were going through this, what other kids were going through this. It wasn't just them. They were not alone. Bringing them into those communities and thinking, gosh, Mom, I wish I would have known that I wasn't the only one that was
Mhm.
struggling. So, that's really a powerful piece of this, to just be able to share with who you can, to be as open as you feel like you can, just like any other thing that is happening, and then to be there to support your kid through that trial and error, and to know there is healing. There were moments in our journey where I thought, what if this can never leave the house again? Because I feel like
Right.
that's the trajectory we're on.
Mhm.
But it's slow, it's incremental, it's trial and error, but you can get through that. And there
Mhm.
is healing for mental health, just as there's healing for anything. But it's hard work.
Yeah, it is hard work, and it's like you said, it's not the quick fix, easy answers. But I
No,
think
no.
normalcy around asking questions,
Yes.
like, well, how would you like to talk to a counselor about that?
Right. Yes.
I was shocked when one of my younger kids, because it seems like the middle ones were the hard ones. One of
Yeah.
my other younger kids, like, actually, yeah. I'm like,
Yes.
oh, well, then we need to make sure that that happens. Or,
Yes.
do we need to call suicide hotline?
Yes.
Yeah, and you might think this is not the level, but it doesn't matter if you think it's the level or not. Like,
It doesn't.
that is an easy
Exactly.
question. They're
Yep.
super nice on the phone,
Yes.
and it's we've had to do that multiple times, and
That's
it just became like, you want to talk to someone? That's fine.
right.
Like,
And that is so big because you're right. It doesn't matter what we think. And we're not going to push that thought into their brain by asking them, do you want to call suicide
right,
hotline? You're not going to make them think, oh, maybe I'm suicidal. No, if they are feeling like they might be, you want to bring that out. And you want to be the
exactly,
one to say, I'm not afraid of that for you. Like while we're
exactly.
afraid, I'm not afraid of getting you help for this. I'm not afraid of connect. I'm not afraid of helping you here. And you don't have to hide, right? You can say it out loud, what you are feeling, that big, scary thing, because that's the only way we can help them out of those big scary things.
Yeah, and sometimes the big scary things, um, they're not as scary as we think if they can get the help that they get. Like,
Uh,
so,
boy, and have I learned that, because I feel like with multiple people, right? Like when you can see it and get them on that trajectory faster, the healing has happened faster here, and so we
mhm,
have been able to see the benefit of just walking straight into it and calling it what it is and moving forward, right? Instead of
yeah.
dancing around for any part of time.
I have to tell you a funny story here. That's a funny story because we have to end it. That it
Okay,
can't
yeah.
like, they can turn out better than you think. So, we have one daughter, and she was over the age of 18, and we
Uh-huh.
said, "Do you need to call suicide hotline?"
Yes.
She said, "Yes," and then they said, "Well, maybe you should check yourself in," because she's over 18.
Okay, yes.
So, she was able to go to the hospital and check herself in for a stay, and we're
Right.
like, "Okay,
Yes.
this
Great.
okay, if this is what needs to be done." Then
Sure.
we didn't hear anything from
Oh
her,
my.
like, for, like, days. And so then we try to call because we know we took her, or
Right.
we know where she is, and they're
Right.
like, "Well, she's over 18, we can't give you that information." And so we're like, "We're pretty sure she doesn't remember our phone numbers," because she didn't have her phone with her, and
Right.
also all our numbers are just buttons, right?
Oh,
They
nobody knows anybody's phone numbers anymore. I
so
don't even think I know my kids' numbers. So yeah.
after, like, 3 days in a row of calling up there, like, "I know you can't tell us this," she said. My husband finally just said, "Okay, listen, if someone by this name happens to be there, she probably doesn't remember our phone number. So here is my phone number.
Yes.
So if I know you can't tell us if someone's there, but if you just happen to know if someone is there." So he gave them his phone number, hung up within 2 minutes.
Oh my
It's
gosh.
like, "Dad, I didn't remember your number." Anyway, it was but she did get help. She did get help, but it
Right.
was like, all of a sudden she's over 18. She
That's so
doesn't know
scary.
our phone
Oh,
number,
sure.
and we know they can't tell us,
Oh,
but
that's
we know
100% true what would
she can't
happen.
remember our phone
Oh my
number
gosh,
to
is that
tell
ever
us
terrifying?
what's happening.
Just but also hilarious because yeah, thank you technology. That's what's happened, right?
And
None of
and
us can
she
find each other,
and she got some help. She was able to get, the help she needed, and
which
she
is
came home
wonderful.
better, and it was kinda funny at the same time because
Right.
we're like, "You probably stayed there longer than you need to because you didn't
Well,
remember
and
our
that's the
phone
best part.
number."
Like, even in the middle of like the worst times, we can find that little bit of
Mhm.
joy. We can find that little thing to like, it's still right when you can still laugh in the middle of all of that adversity. That is a huge thing, right? It's just so
Yeah.
big.
Yeah, I love it. Okay, so the book is You'll Make It and They Will Too. Everything no one talks about when you're parenting teens. Amy, I just have loved this
This has been
conversation.
wonderful. Thank
I
you
could
so
talk to you all
much.
day, but thank you
I know.
so much for writing this book.
Thank
Where
you.
can people go to find more information?
Okay, so my website is just amybettersmidvet.com. I'm on Facebook and Instagram a lot. My kids have me working a little bit on TikTok, on the TikTok as I call it, just to be a super cringy mom. So I have a couple videos on there that you can find. But any of those places will connect you to all the other places. And if you Google the title of the book, then all my places show up now too.
Yeah, and we'll put it in the show notes too. But thank you,
Awesome.
Amy, for being here.
Thank you so much. It was just a delight.